Hello, I'm Anya Lichtarowicz, and this is Somewhere on Earth. I'm in London. It's Tuesday, February the 3rd, 2026. Welcome to the Global Tech Podcast. Coming up today, we're exploring two transformative stories about how technology can reshape lives, economies, and even entire nations. First, consider this. In 2025, about 1.3 billion adults around the world still didn't have a bank account, meaning they lack access to basic financial services like savings, payments, or credit. That's according to the latest World Bank Global Findex database, which shows that despite rapid digital innovation, a large share of the world's population remains financially excluded, especially in lower-income countries. For the unbanked everyday activities many of us take for granted, receiving wages, sending money to family, or buying goods online can be nearly impossible. Mobile technology and open-source payment systems can leapfrog traditional banking infrastructure and give people their first access to the financial system. And leapfrogging isn't just happening in finance, it's happening on the roads too. In a world first, Ethiopia has banned the import of petrol and diesel-powered vehicles and is pushing rapidly towards electric transport. What began as a way to reduce costly fuel imports and cut carbon emissions has become a national strategy to use Ethiopia's abundant renewable energy as a foundation for a cleaner transportation future. By outlawing the import of internal combustion engine vehicles and embracing electric alternatives, Ethiopia is betting that an electrified transport system, powered largely by its own renewable energy, can deliver economic and environmental gains. In this episode, we'll connect the dots between financial inclusion and clean technology, how emerging tech ecosystems are opening up opportunities for people traditionally left behind, and how nations like Ethiopia are redefining what a tech-led future could look like. Let's get started. On today's episode, we're tackling a challenge that might seem almost unimaginable if you live in a country where digital banking and contactless payments are everywhere. Hundreds of millions of adults around the world still don't have access to a bank account or formal financial services. That means no bank cards, no digital wallets, no way to save or send money safely. Even with remarkable global progress in recent years, the latest World Bank Global Findex Database 2025 report shows that about 1.3 billion people are still unbanked. That is, they do not have an account at a bank or similar financial institution or with a mobile money provider. For many of the unbanked, a mobile phone, even a basic brick one, is their main connection to the wider world. These devices are helping to unlock new ways of accessing financial services, leapfrogging traditional banking infrastructure through digital payment systems, mobile money platforms, and open-source innovations. Amanda Brock is CEO of Open UK, a UK-based not-for-profit organisation focused on promoting open technology, and she's just joined the board of the Mojaloop Foundation, who are bringing open-source electronic payments to people without bank accounts.
It's hard almost to imagine in our Western culture, but there are still people who fall into this. It's people who don't have access to bank accounts, payment cards, the things we traditionally take for granted. And if you think of the world we live in today, where it can be quite hard to use cash, there are people who potentially their only access to a payment mechanism is cash. I used to be a lawyer, and my last job before I gave up being a lawyer was doing digital financial services on phones, and a lot of infrastructure is built around using a mobile rather than a card. So leapfrogging the technology we know to bank the unbanked, to take that person who has no access perhaps to a bank account, to finding other alternative payment methods for them through the phone.
We've reported before on instant payment systems, for instance, in Brazil that are very popular, the Pix payment system. And Mojaloop has just launched an instant payment system in Liberia just last month. So do you know how that works?
So all of it is built on open source software, and Mojo Loop has for some time been responding to different tender proposals in African countries and gradually being successful and building out on top of its open source payment platform these different end user technologies, working with the local public bodies, banking systems to do that.
And do you need a smartphone or or a brick phone?
Generally, these payment systems will require you to have a smartphone and have access to that. And when you look at many countries, the way the governments, India is a great example here, the government there has issued phones to people who didn't have them. So as you are going around cities and you see people who have very little and obviously have very little, the one thing they all have and are clinging on to is a mobile phone. And that mobile phone really gives them access in the same but different way that it does to those of us in the West. In the global south, it's giving them access to opportunity through things like the ability to pay.
Absolutely, and to pay very quickly as well.
Yes. And they're, in a way, it's almost like this process is leapfrogging the technologies that we have that we think those who are unbanked are behind. So they have the opportunity to, instead of replicating what we do, to move to a level that we haven't quite got to yet.
And why is the open source side of this so important?
So when I worked in this, I worked for a mobile phone company and we were rolling this out in different countries. And the thing that didn't work for me was that it was not open source. And what that meant was we were a provider they were dependent on and had to contract with constantly and would have to forever to access that service, whether it was like at an individual level or whether that was at a banking ecosystem level or a public sector. And the difference is that the access to open source, it's that old adage, give a man a fish and he will eat, that day. Teach a man to fish or a person to fish and they'll do it for life. And it's not easy because teaching somebody open source is much harder than teaching them to fish. I would challenge, fishermen might not agree with me, but it opens up opportunity. It opens up the ability to develop skills, to be part of a community, to learn skills that will then lead to jobs and to create self-sufficiency over time, that access. And I think for me, open source is really about access for people. It gives access to everybody. And then if you can find a way to learn the skills to become part of the emerging technology that you have access to, it can offer a lifeline to people. It also gives the providers at the commercial level the opportunity to control their own destiny. And this is something, as we see sovereignty conversations, as we see those conversations, you don't actually have to worry so much about where your provider is if the underlying technology that they've given you is open and you have access to it and the ability to maintain it yourself, should you and that provider fall out or part company for any reason.
But there are other kinds of barriers. I mean, you mentioned the Indian government giving people mobile phones.
Yeah.
There are technical, political, social ones. What kind of barriers does Mojali face when trying to roll out these payment
Yeah,
systems?
so the generic high level challenges that anybody is facing when they try to do this kind of thing is mindset shift. So what you're having to do is engage people somehow in technology that they're intimidated by, that they don't know how to do, that they, I'm sure if they're hungry, would be very tempted to sell a phone and eat. So there are lots of different socioeconomic challenges that exist in that emerging environment that have to be surmounted. But I think what any of these open source projects do that's a bit different is by opening it up, they create opportunity, an opportunity that just doesn't exist. So a lot of the challenges can be fixed through that opportunity. So if the challenge is you don't understand how to use the technology and the technology is open, accessible, and somebody else does know, then they can teach you.
Now, we've spoken about individuals and getting individuals who are unbanked on board, but there are fintech companies,
Yeah.
governments, NGOs. They all fit into kind of the Mojo Loop ecosystem. They all help in
Yeah.
some way. How does that all work?
So Mojaloop has a brilliant team in country, and they have for a number of years now worked locally to support it. They do convenings several times a year, and at those convenings, they bring together their communities to work face to face the way any open source project would. And then they also have these ongoing conversations and community engagements in between times. So it's a mixture, as most open source projects are, of a enterprise or commercial or public sector environment with paid individuals and individuals who are interested working together to advance the technology, I guess, and to implement the technology in the space. So these countries are recognizing that as part of their infrastructure, they need to have this payment structuring, and that there's a huge advantage to them in choosing an open source provider.
Where's this all going? Because it's all well and good, saying, right, okay, so you can now make payments. What's the next step for these people who are unbanked?
So for the people who are unbanked, the next step is this normalizing and their country having the ability to manage their own infrastructure. It's an enabler. It's not something that will necessarily be a crutch forever with third parties coming in and providing a service. They implement this, and then there is a learning curve. And that learning curve, again, is classic open source. You take something from a provider that's open source and you build it out. Not speaking in particular for Mojaloop, but generally that's how this will work. And it's not of necessity to make money. They've come out of the Gates Foundation. It's not a commercial enterprise in the traditional sense. So they're able to support that engagement and learning at a national level.
Amanda Brock, CEO of Open UK. You can hear more from Amanda in the Pod Extra version of the show. Please search pod.fan, Somewhere on Earth podcast, go to the page and subscribe. $10 for lots more soap. Listener Steve Clark has commented on Facebook about last week's show and the news that Donald Trump is cutting ties with digital freedom organisations. He says, and this is the shortened version, we need to cut our dependence on US services as it seems they cannot be depended on. I got off Twitter after Musk took over. Facebook is harder as I have friends who don't use anything else, but I will cut my use. I hardly use Amazon, and I use open platforms wherever possible. Adam Collins has kindly emailed us with some suggestions of how to promote the show. One thing he mentions is, whilst it is what everyone else does, asking for listeners to rate or review the podcast, share with friends and follow on social media probably does help. You could always pre-record this and add it to the end of each episode. Well, thanks for that idea, Adam. We might well do that. And I can't stress enough how important ratings are for the show. If we hit 20 ratings, ideally all 5-star by the way, on some platforms we are much more likely to be featured on other show pages, driving new listeners to us. So if you haven't rated us, please do. Ethiopia has become the first country in the world to ban the import of all fuel-powered vehicles, not just cars, but the motorbikes and three-wheelers that millions rely on every day. From now on, if a vehicle is coming into the country, it has to be electric. The decision isn't only about climate change, though. Ethiopia imports all its fuel and subsidises petrol prices, while at the same time it has a surplus of electricity it even sells to neighbouring countries. So shifting transport onto electric power makes sense economically as well as environmentally. That policy shift is already changing life on the streets of Addis Ababa, where local startups are assembling electric motorcycles for commuters and delivery drivers. Cleaner air, quieter roads, and cheaper running costs are part of the appeal. And instead of waiting hours to recharge, some riders can now swap batteries in just a couple of minutes, more like stopping at an ATM than a charging point. Ethiopia's bold experiment is raising a bigger question. Could Africa's cities leapfrog straight past petrol and into an electric future? E-mobility firm Dodai is trying to do just that by scaling the electric vehicles industry in Ethiopia. I spoke to its founder and CEO, Yuma Sasaki.
We are a startup, e-mobility startup, the biggest in Ethiopia. What we are going to do is slightly different, but what we started is basically import parts of electric motorbikes, electric motorcycles to Ethiopia, and then we set up a factory, and then we 100% locally assemble in Ethiopia, the electric motorcycle, and then we basically sell it. It comes with a lithium battery, relatively high quality electric motorcycles. Our mission is to make urban e-mobility accessible to everyone in Africa. So we focused on, first of all, urban problems, urban transportation, and e-mobility rather than only electric motorcycles. So in the future, we might expand to electric tricycles or cars if there's a demand. Yeah, that's what we have been doing. And we assembled and then sold 1,500 electric motorcycles in the last 18 months.
This sounds very exciting because obviously e-motorbikes, you can imagine cleaner air, quieter streets, smoother commutes. Motorbikes are really very popular in Ethiopia. So that all sounds great, but how on earth are you going to charge these motorbikes? How on earth, if I buy one from you, how do I charge it when I'm going across the city? Because obviously the infrastructure is a real issue, and those charging stations really are very few and very far between.
Actually, that's one of the reasons that we started electric two-wheelers. So our electric motorbikes, electric motorcycles, the battery is small enough compared to the batteries for cars, so that you can just charge at your home and in 4 or 5 hours and then fully charged. And then you can drive 100 kilometers per charge. So like with any outlets in Ethiopia, you can charge. And I remember that Ethiopia, in terms of electricity, it has surplus. So average people in Addis Ababa, the capital of Ethiopia, usually tend to have access to outlet to charge their vehicles.
But if you're going on a longer journey, you are going to need somewhere, aren't you? Or could you come up with another idea? Because you guys have come up with another idea, haven't you?
Two-wheelers could be affordable if we present it in the right way. And also it can generate income for delivery drivers. That's why we started two-wheelers. And in terms of charging, yes, now I just mentioned that majority of our customers, let's say 90 to 95% of our customers, electric motorcycle owners, are delivery drivers, gig workers. They purchase electric motorcycles to basically make money.
So
rather than for commuting.
Yeah, so they need to be able to move quickly, don't they? They can't really, in effect, lose time where they could be delivering charging. So you've come up with a battery swap solution. How does that work?
Yeah. So first of all, we haven't invented. But we are the first one, and then right now the only one to start battery swapping model. So basically battery swapping. From customers' point of view, you will purchase electric motorcycles without battery, and and then we have few hundred stations in the future, where we are waiting for you for your driver with a fully charged battery. So from a customer's point of view, instead of you spending 4 to 5 hours waiting for the battery to be charged, you just spend 2-3 minutes at each station. It's a bit like a gas station or ATM. Whenever you need it. And then again, it might not make sense for commuters because you don't travel like 100 kilometers per day. And also you are not making money. But from gig workers' delivery drivers' point of view, it really makes sense because for them, what they care is the net money that they can bring home. So they rather prefer to pay extra to do swap batteries in 2-3 minutes, and then you go back to work.
And how many? I mean, you're saying in the future you'll have 100 swapping stations, ideally. How many have you got now?
We are still in a soft launch. We are going to officially launch in April. So we are testing with the 5 stations now.
And if this rollout is successful, if your soft launch is good, how much of a game changer could it be, do you think? Not only for your company, but for Ethiopia's entire e-mobility ecosystem?
To be honest, it will take time. Soft launch works, but it's relatively complicated model, because it's new, first of all, you will not own the batteries, and then you have to use smartphone, to do all the transaction of swapping. Just like rideshare, you need a smartphone to do Uber, right? The same. And then all payment digital. So what we are going to solve is, first of all, initial cost, because from the customer's point of view, you have to pay for vehicle and then batteries if you buy both. But in this business model of battery swapping, we sell only vehicles, which is good and bad for them and good and bad for us. From customers' point of view, now the initial cost is 50% less, because battery cost roughly 50% of the vehicle.
So it is potentially cheaper for people. And how scalable is this across other cities in Ethiopia and then even further across Africa?
It's like, let's say, how scalable rideshare is across the world. First of all, this model works only in urban area where you see a density, because it requires huge amount of capex investment by the business operator. You need to set up hundreds of stations, and you pay the rent, and you set up stations, and then you have to own. Customers don't own, means you have to own as a business 10,000 or 30,000 of batteries, right? And each of them cost about $500 to $700. So it's very capital intensive. So it doesn't really make sense in the, let's say, non-urban area or countryside. That's one. But apart from that, in terms of business model, technology, operation-wise, it's very scalable. The difference is more about regulations, just like rideshare. If you go to, let's say, Kenya from Ethiopia, or DRC Congo or Nigeria, just different sets of requirement in terms of doing business, because it's kind of renting business, renting the batteries, right? And then kind of supporting charging the vehicles. So kind of power, energy business. And then depending on the country, the way that the government see the business model is different, which requires different complex the permits. So that's the biggest issue in terms of scalability. But operations and then technology-wise, it's very scalable model.
Yuma Sasaki on Ethiopia's electric vehicle revolution. That's all for this week. Just a quick reminder that we have all the shows on our YouTube channel, so please go and check us out there. Please do rate us on your favourite podcasting platform as well. And get in touch via hello@somewhereonearth.co or WhatsApp on +44 7486 329 484 or on our socials. The production manager is Liz Toohey and I'm the editor. Until next week, bye-bye.